Thank you Artlist for sponsoring this video. The internet's most popular camera is back once again in the form of the Fuji X100VI, and everyone seems to be talking about this camera and its upgrades. A 40 megapixel sensor, in-body stabilization, 10-bit video, a brand new recipe, etc, etc. But to be honest, I don't really care about all of these specs. The most important thing for me is how the camera actually performs. So instead of sitting here in this video and just reiterating all the specs that you guys are probably well aware of with this camera, I went out and I shot a ton of photos, a ton of videos, and I just tried to get a good feel for this camera and its use cases. So in this video, I just want to share my experience using this camera over the last week, shooting here in Chiang Mai, Thailand, show you some photos, show you some videos, and also help you decide if you should upgrade to the X100VI, or if you don't have an X100 series camera, which one to get. And before we jump into it, I'm super pumped to announce that enrollment to the 2024 cohort of Finding Freedom, my travel photography accelerator, is officially open until March 28th, and the course starts on April 1st. Now, Finding Freedom is a 5-week live course designed to help you build your travel photography business. So for those of you that dream of traveling, you want to go out and score clients while you're abroad, and you want to build a location independent photography business, then this program is for you. And I ran this for the first time last year, and it was super successful. We've had a ton of awesome students go through the program already, and I'm pumped to be bringing it back as a cohort in 2024. And if you guys are interested in learning more, I'll put a link down in the description. You can check that out. And on that page, you can also watch my free workshop. And in the last 20 to 25 minutes, I talk all about the program. So I hope you guys can join us. Once again, the link is in the description. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. Okay, but let's talk about this camera from a photography perspective. Now, I have taken this thing out all over Chiang Mai. I've brought it to a few different markets, and I've also just driven around on my motorbike and looked for cool stuff on the side of the road. And there are so many hidden gems in Chiang Mai, and I have been shooting like crazy with this camera over the past week, and I'm super happy with some of the photos that I've been shooting, especially with the new Riala Ace recipe. And I'll put the recipe up on the screen for you guys, but all these photos here were shot with that particular recipe, and it looks really good. It just has a really natural color representation. It's sharp, it's got a little bit of grain for some style, and overall, I think it just looks really good, and it's probably going to be one of my favorite everyday recipes that I shoot with on this camera, and I'm really pumped with some of the images that I've been getting with it. I've also been shooting with the Portra 800 recipe, which looks really good. And actually this morning I went out with my buddy and we shot at one of the markets with the Portra 800 recipe, and I thought they looked really cool, and I'll put that recipe up for you guys as well. And I gotta say, Chiang Mai is one of my favorite places to shoot with a camera like this because the JPEG recipes look so cool, and Chiang Mai has such a vintage, old school aesthetic to it that I think looks really good on some of the recipes that I've been shooting with. And once again, one of the reasons why I love shooting with these Fuji cameras is for those JPEG recipes. I want to just be able to shoot cool looking photos and not really have to edit them. And the Fuji X100VI delivers, and I'm loving the new recipe as well. So I'm going to continue shooting with that going forward. But recipes aside, this camera is a joy to shoot with, just like the Fuji X100V. And to be honest, it doesn't feel all that different. If you were to just look at two photos next to each other, shot in different scenes, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But I did shoot a few scenes in a controlled environment, and yeah, the X100VI, it is slightly sharper, but that's about it. And with my style of photography, you know, I'm not really all that interested in maximizing sharpness and maximizing contrast. Especially with a camera like this, the main thing that I'm focusing on is the vibe of the photo, the feeling of the photo. I don't need the highest contrast. You know, I add film grain into my images to kind of help tone things down. And I like to use pro mist filters to kind of take that digital edge off as well. So while it does have better contrast and better sharpness, to me, that's not all that important from a photography perspective. So in short, once again, just like the X100V, this camera is a joy to shoot with. I love that new Real Ace recipe, and this camera is definitely going to continue being an essential part of my creative workflow. And you know what else is an essential piece of my creative workflow? The sponsor of today's video, Artlist. So unless you've been living under a rock and you don't know Artlist, Artlist is a royalty-free digital assets platform with thousands of high-quality music tracks, sound effects, plugins, templates, and stock footage. Finding the right song can make or break your project, and Artlist actually uses AI to look at all the songs that you have saved and recommend you new songs that they think you might like. This has been an absolute game changer for the channel because it helps me find music so much easier, but Artlist is so much more than that as well. The massive library of sound effects and footage is also incredibly useful for spicing up your videos, and if that wasn't enough, Artlist also has a massive library of motion graphics templates compatible with all major video editing softwares that you can simply drop into your videos to help share ideas or keep your audience engaged. And one of my favorites is this film burn effects template by Bob Jackson, and all I have to do is download it, drag and drop it into my timeline, and it's good to go. Artlist makes it so easy to spice up your videos, and I love the templates that they have on offer. Now, I've been using Artlist for years, and it's one of the best investments that I've made in my business. And thankfully, Artlist has a wide range of subscription plans to meet you where you're at as a creator. So whether you're just starting out as a beginner or you're working with a ton of clients, Artlist has a plan for you so you can get the most out of the platform. So if you're looking for highly curated music, sound effects, stock footage, plugins, and templates, then head over to the first link in the description where you can go check out Artlist and all it has to offer. So thank you so much, Artlist, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. Okay, but let's talk about the video capabilities of the X100VI. And I think this is where this camera really shines. And I feel like a lot of people are neglecting discussing the video capabilities of this camera, but in my opinion, I think that's where all the upgrades have gone in this camera. Yeah, it's a better photo camera, but it is an exponentially better video camera. And I've been shooting a ton of video with this camera, probably just as much as I've been shooting with photos. I shot a ton of video in the market, and overall, I've been pretty impressed with this video, but I have to say, it was an absolute nightmare to set this thing up for hybrid shooting. The first time I took it out to shoot video, I went to a market in the morning and I was shooting in the 4K high quality mode, which looks really, really nice, by the way, and I'll show you a few comparisons here in a few minutes. But I was shooting in shutter priority, which is what I usually like to do because I don't want to have to fiddle with my settings if I'm just shooting some simple B-roll, especially in a really dynamic lighting environment like the market that I was shooting in. But after getting home and looking at the footage just kept flickering, and I actually have a lot of clips from this morning that I couldn't really use because it just kept flickering and the exposure settings just kept changing so quickly. And I don't feel like that's the case with my Sony. It's a much more gradual jump, and there is a setting on here that I think might have been causing that. I forget what it's called, but I'll put it down on the link down here. I ended up disabling that, but at the same time, I just ended up shooting in manual exposure as well, and that flickering went away. So I don't know if that was just the aperture and the ISO jumping really quickly, or if it was that specific setting that was causing that flickering. But once I disabled that and I started shooting fully in manual exposure, I think the video from this camera looks really, really nice. But to be honest, setting this camera up as a hybrid camera was a bit of a nightmare. And I think the reason for that is because it's a really simple body. You know, it doesn't have all that many buttons, it doesn't have all that many dials, and because of that, you have to go through menu systems to get a lot of stuff done, as opposed to on my Sony, I have a lot of different buttons I can use to switch things up. I can easily switch between manual exposure, shutter priority, aperture priority, whatever, but on this camera, I have to go into the menu settings, and just to set up hybrid mode, I had to go into the camera menu settings and change so many different things just to get it to work, just to get it to save all of my video settings when I was shooting in video and all of my photo settings when I was shooting in photo, but I figured it out. And if you guys are interested in learning exactly how I set up this camera to do that, I'm happy to make a video on that. But overall, like I said, the footage looks really good. And I was shooting in the normal 4K mode, which I think looks nice, the 4K high quality mode, as well as the 6.2K resolution mode. And I think they all look really good. Yes, the 4K high quality mode and the 6.2K mode do look a little bit sharper, a little bit better, but I can't tell the difference between the 4K high quality and the 6.2K. Maybe I just need to look a little bit closer, but I think the 4K high quality mode is probably the one that I'm going to be using the most. And if I do need a little bit more stabilization, I'll use the 4K mode with the enhanced IBIS built in. And speaking of the IBIS, I think that's one of the reasons why this camera is such an upgrade in terms of video. It's having the ability to handhold your camera and get stable shots. I don't carry a gimbal with me. I don't like using gimbals. I just like a run and gun setup that I can run around, switch between photo and video, capture some cinematic video, capture some cool photos, and move on. I don't want to weigh myself down with all this gear. And now that this camera has IBIS, I can do that, and it's been a joy to shoot video with. Now, most of the video I've been shooting has been in the base Reala Ace color profile. So I just set it to Reala Ace. I don't change anything else. And I think the footage looks really, really nice in that profile. I did shoot a little bit in F-Log as well. Now, I've never graded F-Log before, but I do grade a lot of log footage from my Sony. And overall, I think it grades pretty well. But to be honest, I probably won't be shooting with F-Log going forward, just because I think the Fuji recipes look great in video mode. And it's so nice to be able to go out, shoot, and have a color graded image that looks really nice straight out of camera. Now, does it compete with the video from a camera like a Sony? In my opinion, no. Sony looks so good. It's rich. It has so much depth to it. And I think it just looks a lot better than the Fuji footage. But with that said, the Fuji footage looks great. And if you're just shooting for YouTube or you're shooting some small projects, this is more than enough to capture some really cinematic, beautiful video that's gonna look great for your videos. And I am definitely going to use this for video going forward, simply because it's so small and the footage looks good and it's good enough for me. So I'm really happy with the video features from this camera. And this is the main reason why I decided to upgrade from the X100V, is because it shoots great video. But okay, before we talk about who this camera is for, I want to mention a few things that I'm really not that happy with this camera. And number one, I mentioned this before, it's just the menu system. Setting this thing up was a bit of a nightmare, and I wish it was easier to switch between photo and video mode and just a more seamless kind of hybrid shooting experience. Yes, it's very possible to have a great hybrid setup on this camera, but it is not going to be as efficient as a camera with more buttons, more dials, that just makes it easier to get to your settings and change things up. So yeah, I wish it was a little bit more tactical in that regard, but at the same time, I get why they kept it simple, because it's supposed to be this kind of simple, straightforward, old school camera. So I totally get it, but because I really want to use this as a tool and it's not so much a style icon for myself, I wish it did have a little bit more buttons, a little bit more features to make hybrid shooting a little bit more accessible. The other thing is battery life. The battery life is not all that great, especially now that I'm shooting video on this camera. The battery dies quite quickly. So I have to carry a couple batteries around, and if I'm spending all day shooting, I need to carry 3 or 4 batteries if I'm gonna be shooting all day long. So something to think about if you are picking up one of these and you do wanna shoot video, I would highly recommend buying a few spare batteries because the battery life is not great. And I really wish they did upgrade that battery, but unfortunately they didn't. Another thing that I was really hoping would change with the X100VI is its speed, and generally it does feel a little bit snappier, it feels a little bit better. But when you're shooting with clarity or sharpness, the camera still takes a while to save that image after you shoot it. So you can't just snap, snap, snap. And sometimes I like to have the ability to, burst off a couple photos and not have to wait for the camera to save each photo after I shoot it. And unfortunately, the Fuji X100VI still suffers from that. The last thing I wish really would have been upgraded is the screen and the EBF. They're not bad by any means, but I think they could definitely be improved. And we'll probably have to wait another 3 years for those things to be improved. But having that resolution in the LCD and in the EVF is never a bad thing. And I remember when I picked up the Sony A1 and I looked through that EVF, it blew my mind. So it would be really nice to have just improvements in those two regards. A small gripe, but a gripe nonetheless. But okay, that is my experience shooting with the Fuji X100VI. And in short, yeah, it's an awesome camera. Yes, it's an upgrade over the X100V. For photos, yes, it is, but especially for videos. And I think that's where this camera really shines. So if you have an X100V and you're thinking about upgrading it and you're mainly a photographer, I would say you probably don't need to upgrade unless you can get on a list and you can sell your X100V and you have the money to spare. Then yeah, absolutely get after it. Do something that makes you happy. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're only thinking about upgrading because you think it's going to be a massive upgrade from a photo perspective, then I would probably say just stick with the X100V. It still captures awesome photos and it's going to continue capturing awesome photos for years to come. Now, on the flip side of that, if you feel limited by the video in the X100V, which is very much lackluster, then I would definitely recommend upgrading to the X100VI because the video features are awesome. They look great, they work really well, and overall, I've been really happy shooting video with this camera, despite all the hassles that I had to go through to set it up. Overall, I think it's a great video camera. Now, if you're looking to buy your first Fuji, I would say the same thing. If you want to shoot video, get the X100VI. But if you're not fussed about that and you just want to shoot photos, pick up the X100V or even the X100F. That camera still shoots awesome photos as well. And I wouldn't upgrade just for the better sharpness that this new sensor gives you or the new Reala Ace recipe. You can still get really close to that recipe on some of these older cameras. So overall, definitely for video, but for photo, the older cameras are just as good in my opinion. But in short, the X100VI is once again an awesome camera, just like the X100V, and it's been an absolute pleasure to shoot with. I hope you guys enjoyed some of the photos and videos that I shot throughout this video, and I really look forward to shooting more with this camera going forward. I'm going to the US later this year, I'm going to Europe, and I'm going to Bali in 2 weeks. I'm definitely gonna shoot a ton of photos there as well. But thank you guys so much for watching this video, and let me know in the comments down below what you think of this new camera. Do you think it's overhyped? Do you think it's worthy of an upgrade over the X100V? Are you excited about picking one up? Let me know in the comments down below. And also, don't forget to check out Artlist via the first link in the description. Thank you so much, Artlist, for sponsoring this video. And thank you guys for watching. I will chat with you guys again very soon in the next one, and I hope you have a great day.